Imagine being married for 10 long years, trusting the person beside you, sharing every secret, every moment, every touch. Now imagine one night pulling back the curtain on a horrifying lie that leaves you frozen in disbelief. A woman discovers her 600-pound husband has been hiding a shocking truth, one that would shatter her reality and push her over the edge. What she found beneath his clothes led to betrayal, rage, and ultimately murder. Welcome to Dark Motives, the place where we uncover the darkest and most twisted true crime stories from around the world. If you are new here, make sure you hit that subscribe button right now and turn on all notifications so you never miss a case like this. Your support helps us bring you stories that others are too afraid to tell. And while you are at it, drop a comment below and let us know where you are watching from. We always love seeing how far these cases reach. Now, back to tonight's story. On the outside, their marriage seemed ordinary. 10 years together, a couple who shared laughter, struggles, and a home. But behind closed doors, secrets were buried under layers of silence. When one of those secrets was ripped open, everything collapsed, and a shocking discovery became the trigger for a brutal crime. They lived in Columbus, Ohio, a city where neighbors often knew each other's names, but behind their front door no one really knew what went on. She was 38, a woman who had given her best years to a marriage she believed in. He was 42, a man weighing more than 600 pounds, confined mostly to their home, depending on her for almost everything. Friends said they rarely saw them together outside anymore. At church, people whispered about how she carried the weight of the relationship while he barely moved from his chair. On the surface, she was devoted, caring for him through health problems and endless challenges. But inside, cracks were forming. A decade of sacrifice and unanswered questions had left her restless, searching for something she could not name. Their marriage wasn't violent, not at first. It was quiet, heavy with secrets, the kind of secrets that sit in a room like a shadow no one talks about. For years she pushed the doubts aside, until one night, when the truth could no longer stay hidden. The cracks in their marriage widened with time. She noticed things that did not make sense, moments that felt staged, touches that seemed hollow. At first she thought it was her imagination, the fatigue of caring for a man twice her size and the frustration of lost years. But deep inside, a quiet voice told her that something was not right. Nights became the hardest. He avoided intimacy, brushing off her attempts with excuses about pain, exhaustion, or the discomfort of his weight. She convinced herself it was normal, that love was about sacrifice, patience, and waiting. Yet when she looked at him, a question lingered. What exactly was he hiding? Her suspicions grew when she noticed his obsession with privacy. He guarded his body fiercely, never undressing fully in front of her. Even after 10 years of marriage, there were layers she had never seen. He insisted on dim lights, on keeping certain parts of himself covered, on shutting doors when she came too close. To her, it no longer felt like modesty. It felt like a wall. She began replaying the years in her mind, searching for signs she had missed. The rushed wedding, the closed conversations, the way he avoided doctor visits. Each memory became a piece of a puzzle that refused to fit. And the more she thought about it, the more the truth felt dangerously close. By the time the 10th year arrived, her patience had thinned to nothing. The tension in the house was suffocating. She was determined to get answers, even if it meant tearing down every secret he had built around himself. What she was about to uncover would not just shake her marriage, it would unleash a storm no one could stop. That night in Columbus was like any other. The house was silent. The television buzzed faintly in the background, and the weight of years pressed down on her shoulders. But she was not going to let another day pass without answers. She walked into the bedroom and looked at him sprawled across the bed, his heavy frame filling the mattress. She confronted him directly, demanding the truth. Her voice shook, but her determination did not. He tried to dismiss her again, offering weak excuses, shifting the subject, hiding behind his size and fragility. But this time she refused to back down. Her hands clenched into fists, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and fury. When he turned his head away and muttered something under his breath, she snapped. She moved forward and grabbed at his clothes, tearing at the fabric that had always been off limits. He shouted, struggled, but his weight pinned him down. She yanked hard, ripping at his pants until the seams gave way. And then she froze. What she saw beneath the torn fabric made her stomach twist in horror. It wasn't real. The man she had called her husband for 10 years, the man she thought she knew in every way, was wearing a prosthetic. A fake organ strapped tightly against his body. The betrayal was so overwhelming it felt like a physical blow. 10 years of questions suddenly had an answer, and that answer was deception. She stepped back, shaking, her mind racing through every intimate moment, every excuse, every shadow of their past. Nothing had been real. The truth was uglier than she ever imagined. Her breath came in shallow gasps as she staggered back from the bed. The room seemed smaller, the air heavier, her world collapsing in on itself. 10 years of her life had been built on a lie, and now the truth stood in front of her like a cruel joke. He tried to calm her, stuttering excuses, insisting it was complicated, that she wouldn't understand. But his words only cut deeper. The betrayal felt unbearable. She remembered the nights she cried herself to sleep, thinking she was the problem, thinking she wasn't enough. Now she realized he had stolen more than her trust. He had stolen her youth, her time, her dignity. Rage replaced shock, a rage so sharp it burned through her chest and clouded her judgment. He reached out a trembling hand, begging her to listen, but she slapped it away. The sound echoed in the room like a warning shot. Years of bottled-up anger spilled out as she shouted, accusing him of using her, mocking her, trapping her in a prison of lies. Her voice grew louder with each word, while his grew weaker, more desperate, as if he already knew there was no way to repair the damage. For a moment she turned away, pressing her hands against her face, fighting tears that burned like fire. But when she looked back at him, still strapped with that false piece of flesh, the fury came back twice as strong. She no longer saw a husband. She saw a stranger who had invaded her life and stolen everything she had given freely. That was the moment she broke. Her hands trembled, her voice cracked, but inside her a dark decision began to form. A line had been crossed, one that could never be erased. And in her mind there was only one way to end the nightmare. The shouting rattled through the house until it felt like the walls themselves were trembling. She stood over him, her body shaking, her chest heaving with every furious breath. He tried to pull the sheets over himself, to cover the humiliating truth she had uncovered, but she yanked them away and threw them to the floor. There was no hiding anymore. He pleaded with her, his voice breaking, insisting it did not change who he was, that he still loved her. But his words sounded empty, hollow, like another layer of the lie. The more he spoke, the more the fury inside her grew. She no longer heard a husband, she heard a deceiver. Something inside her snapped. Her hands searched blindly, gripping the nearest object within reach, a heavy lamp from the nightstand. She raised it high above her head, her vision blurred with tears, her heart pounding so loud it drowned out his cries. For a single second time froze. Then the lamp came crashing down. The sound was sickening, the impact brutal. He groaned, his massive frame shaking under the weight of the blow. But the rage in her chest refused to let go. She struck again and again, each swing fueled by 10 years of anger, betrayal, and heartbreak. The room filled with chaos, the thud of metal, his desperate gasps, and her sobs that tore from deep within her. When it was over, silence returned, but it was a silence that screamed louder than any sound. He lay still, his body broken, the secret he had guarded for years now meaningless in death. She stood there trembling, her hands red, the lamp slipping from her grasp and clattering to the floor. The weight of what she had done pressed down on her shoulders, heavier than the man she had just killed. The room smelled of iron, the air thick and suffocating. She stood frozen, staring at the lifeless body sprawled across the bed. Her chest rose and fell in uneven bursts as if her lungs refused to work. The lamp lay at her feet, coated in the proof of her crime. For a long moment, she did not move. Her mind replayed the last 10 years like a broken reel, the arguments, the sacrifices, the lies she had just uncovered. All of it led here, to this room, to this bed, to this irreversible act. She wanted to scream, but the sound caught in her throat, strangled by the weight of shock. Finally, instinct took over. She stumbled into the bathroom, splashing cold water on her face, scrubbing her hands until they burned. No matter how hard she rubbed, the red stains clung to her skin, as if they had carved themselves into her. She stared into the mirror and barely recognized the woman looking back. She paced the room, her mind racing. Should she call for help, or confess, or run? Every option felt impossible. The walls seemed to close in on her, the silence louder with every passing second. She dragged the sheets over his body, trying to cover what she had done, but it was useless. The truth was already too big to hide. When she finally sank to the floor, her body shaking uncontrollably, she realized she had crossed a line that could never be erased. Whatever came next, she was no longer just a wife. She was now a killer, and the night was only beginning to unravel. The body lay motionless on the bed, and the weight of silence pressed down on her like a stone. She knew someone would eventually notice. A man his size could not simply vanish without questions. She had to think fast. Her eyes darted around the room, searching for anything that could help. Plastic bags, sheets, even old boxes stacked in the corner. She tried dragging him off the bed, but his massive frame barely shifted an inch. Panic clawed at her chest as she realized she could not move him alone. Every attempt left her more frantic, more desperate. She opened windows to let the night air in, hoping to mask the thick smell that clung to the room. She stuffed the bloodied sheets into a trash bag, her hands trembling as the plastic stretched and tore under the weight. The evidence was everywhere, and she was drowning in it. At one point, she considered calling the police, fabricating a story of self-defense or sudden collapse. But each time she reached for her phone, fear stopped her cold. How could she explain the torn clothes, the fake organ, the rage written into every strike? No, confession was not an option. So she chose silence. She wiped surfaces, hid what she could, and forced herself to breathe. But the truth was impossible to erase. No matter how hard she tried, the house itself seemed to whisper her crime back at her. Every shadow, every creak, every silence reminded her she was no longer a wife grieving a lie. She was a killer living inside one. It did not take long for questions to begin. In Columbus, a man that size could not simply disappear unnoticed. Neighbors had not seen him in days, and whispers began to spread about the silence around the house. Some said they heard shouting that night. Others noticed she looked different, her face pale and drained, her movements frantic. When officers eventually arrived for a welfare check, the stench hit them before they even stepped through the door. The air was heavy, thick, unmistakable. They called her name, but her answers were shaky, her eyes refusing to meet theirs. Her story shifted with every question, small cracks opening in her lies. Inside the bedroom, the scene told its own story. Stains on the carpet, torn fabric, and a body too large to hide. The investigators took one look and knew something violent had taken place. The prosthetic device strapped to him added another layer of shock, one that made the case unlike anything they had encountered before. She tried to explain, stumbling over her words, insisting she had been betrayed, humiliated, deceived. But to the officers standing in that room, betrayal was not a defense for murder. They photographed the scene, collected the lamp, and documented every piece of evidence with clinical precision. By the time she was handcuffed and led outside, the quiet street was crowded with flashing lights and curious neighbors. Some shook their heads, others whispered in disbelief. She kept her eyes low, knowing the life she had lived, the secrets she had discovered. and the rage that had consumed her were now out in the open for the world to see. The courtroom was filled with silence as her story unfolded. Some saw her as a victim of deceit. Others saw only a killer who let rage control her. The jury did not debate the lies or the humiliation. They focused only on the act, the blood, the brutal end of a man who had once been her husband. In the end, betrayal met punishment. She traded her freedom for a prison cell, her anger for endless nights replaying the moment when everything shattered. The secret that had haunted their marriage for a decade became the evidence that sealed her fate. This case leaves behind a chilling question. Was she pushed to the edge by a lie too big to bear, or did she choose to let anger become her master? Betrayal can destroy trust, but can it ever justify taking a life? Now we want to hear from you. Do you believe her rage was understandable? Or was this nothing more than cold-blooded murder? Drop your thoughts in the comments below and let us know where in the world you are watching from. We read every single comment, and your voice matters here. If you found this story gripping, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss the darkest cases we uncover. Thank you for spending time with us tonight on Dark Motives. Until next time, stay safe, stay aware, and remember, trust is fragile. And once broken, it can turn deadly.